Hey dreamers, thank you for taking the time to listen to this. Please share any thoughts in the comments section below. And if you don't want to miss any future sleep stories or sleep story compilations, then you can subscribe and turn on bell notifications. Now it's time to drift peacefully into slumberland. Now this is a story about a fairy who's playing her magical guitar while gazing over the beautiful landscape before encountering a mouse which guides her on the most incredible inner journey of discovery and deep relaxation to understand the true nature of reality and change. So just take a moment to allow your eyes to close and allow yourself to begin to relax. And with your eyes closed, I don't know whether you'll drift asleep faster to the sound of my voice or whether it'll be to the spaces between my words. And as you comfortably drift asleep, I'm just going to tell this sleep story in the background. And this is a sleep story about a fairy who lives in a vineyard. And this fairy is relaxing one day in this vineyard. She's sitting on a log, strumming a guitar, plucking those delicate strings of that guitar. Her fairy's song so delicately, calmly rising in that guitar, almost like a mist of multicoloured, multi-sensory peace and harmony. And as she so beautifully plucks at that guitar, so she finds herself drifting peacefully into a reverie in her own mind, almost being transported by the music. And she reaches that state of mind where she's unsure whether she's creating music which is helping to guide her state and guide her deeper and deeper into the experience, or whether her state of drifting deeper and deeper relaxed is guiding her guitar playing. And as she sits on that log playing that guitar so peacefully, so calmly and gently, the fairy can feel the gentle breeze on her face and the sensation of that breeze blowing through her wings, the rustling of leaves overhead in the nearby trees, the sight of the grass undulating like waves as the breeze passes across that grass. The faint scent of flowers, so sweet, tickling the nostrils with each breath. Where the clouds are dancing by across the sky, calmly, gently, moving so peacefully as she drifts deeper and deeper into her guitar playing reverie. She can feel the sensation of the trunk underneath her while she plays, playing the most beautiful melody of peace and calmness, tranquility, drifting into her experience. As the day gently passes and the sun softly moves across the sky, and while she plays that guitar. As she does most days, she comes to this location, relaxes, getting some fresh air, and drifting into her own world while playing, gazing down over the vineyard, and watching the world go by, people working in the vineyard, the little village beyond the vineyard. Today felt like any other day, just relaxing there, playing the guitar. And while she continued to play that guitar, in a moment's pause between some notes, she heard the faintest of claps. She turned to see who it was, and she saw a friendly little mouse standing by a tree. And that friendly little mouse clapped, applauding her playing, told her how beautiful her playing was in its squeaky mouse voice. And the fairy engaged with the mouse, having a polite and friendly conversation. And the mouse said, "Your music is like magic. It seems to evoke magical powers, almost as if it's channeling the energy of the universe through the vibrations of the strings." And the fairy said, "The strings, that's the theory. It is about channeling vibrations and knowing which vibrations to cause. Different vibrations lead to different states of being, of mind and body and reality." And the mouse said, "I think I have a book you may well be interested in seeing." And the fairy packed away her guitar and followed that mouse as it tootled along around the tree, headed into a small hole in the front of another tree. And the fairy followed, having to tilt the guitar case slightly to fit through the hole, following the mouse into the darkness of this tree, following the mouse through the inside of this tree. And this tree was so dark she could just about see the outline of the mouse. But the deeper into the tree they went, the less light reached them from that opening into the tree. And just as she thought she was about to lose track of the mouse, because it was getting darker and darker, she heard the sound of a latch click and a door unlock. And then a large wooden door creaked and swung open. She could see light again, and the mouse welcomed her in and invited her into its home. And walked her around the home, showing her the different items on the shelves, and then walked her to a bookcase and told her that this is a magic bookshelf. These books on this bookshelf are magic. And I think that you'll find one of these books deeply interesting. And the fairy asked, why? And the mouse explained that they're not going to tell her. It'll be down to her to discover that. That the magic of this will be greater if she discovers that for herself. And so the fairy looks at the different books, pulls one of the books off the shelf, has a flick through the book, places it back on the shelf, pulls another book off a shelf, has a look through that book and places it back on the shelf. It's only when they get to the third book they pull off the shelf. They open the book and notice a fold-out page, and the mouse has the slightest smile on their face. The fairy folds out that page, reveals the most beautiful painting of the ocean. And the mouse says that this book is magic, and this painting is magic. This painting is magic in the same way that your music is magic. The fairy takes her guitar out, strums the strings, and as the notes vibrate, so the painting seems to vibrate gently. And while it's vibrating, so it seems to deepen. It seems to get deeper and deeper. And as it gets deeper and deeper, it starts to appear more 3D. And while it appears more three-dimensional, Fairy notices it seems to be almost coming alive, as if that ocean scene is real, like a window upon the real ocean. And with a second strum on the guitar strings, it's almost as if harmony or a resonance is formed between the vibrating strings and the 3D landscape. And that 3D landscape begins to suck the fairy into the painting. And the mouse says, go with the experience. You'll be pleasantly surprised. And so the fairy goes with the experience, relaxes, and drifts and floats into that painting. And the more they float into the painting, the more they can hear the sound of the waves crashing on the shore below, see the clouds in the sky, and they find themselves stood atop the hill leading down to the ocean, with the view very much like it looked in the painting. And out to sea in this painting, she noticed how rough the water was, the white water, travelling to the shore, crashing on the shore below, the churning, grinding sound as the waves pulled back out to sea. And the fairy could see a whale swimming far out to sea, looking almost like an island. only the movement revealing its true identity, and an occasional break in the cloud as shards of light dance and shimmer through the hazy sky and across the surface of the ocean. And the fairy finds her way down to the seashore. As she's walking down to the seashore, she occasionally turns back to look behind her. But looking behind just looks like what is in the opposite direction in this landscape. She can't see where she came from. But she feels so intrigued, she continues to follow the path down to the seashore. And down by the seashore, she finds a bench. She sits on that bench. She can smell the salty sea air, feeling the sea spray as the waves crash on the shore. And some of that spray finds its way to her face, her cheek. And she rests on that bench, watches that whale as it leaps from the water, splashes down on its back. Curious what she would hear if she could hear under the water. And then while looking around and just enjoying the environment, feeling the temperature of this location, hearing the sound of the ocean, watching the clouds pass by, that whale swimming out to sea. She hears a rumble noise, an almost growl in the distance, and a thud sound. Curious what this is, she looks around her and she spies a dragon flying from the distance, heading closer and closer to her. Its wings making a thudding sound with each beat. Thump, 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 thump. And eventually that dragon gets close enough to land. The dragon lands on the stony beach. Sounds of the stones sliding, moving beneath its feet. And in a booming voice, the dragon calls the fairy over. And asks the fairy to climb on its back. And says, I've got somewhere to show you. So the fairy climbs on the dragon's back. The dragon launches high into the sky. Starts to fly over the ocean. And the fairy can see the patterns of the waves from above. That whale still swimming down there. And the fairy can see that there is an island off in the distance, and the dragon appears to be heading towards that island. And while the dragon flies, it barely says a word, just focuses on its journey. And spray in the air continues to strike the fairy's face with that salty tasting moisture, before eventually arriving at the island. Landing at the island, the fairy notices there's a structure here, dismounts the dragon, heads into the structure, discovers this is an unusual spa. And so the fairy explores the spa, and in the middle of this spa is a shimmering, shining tree. And tending to this shimmering, shining, incredibly healthy looking tree is a green fairy. And the green fairy welcomes this fairy, and on welcoming the fairy, they walk this fairy to what looks like a building, except that this building, instead of a doorway, seems to have a pulsing portal. And so the two fairies walk through that portal, the fairy experiencing a slight tingle through her body as she passes through that portal. And the other side of the portal looks like she's in a shop. Only this appears to be an old-fashioned Victorian shop. There's a strong scent of wood. And there's a sense of peace and harmony. And the green fairy introduces the fairy to the elders, saying that those who are here running this shop are the elders of the land. And it's a land through time and space. And those elders tell the fairy that she is here to enhance her abilities, that she has the power of magic within her, the ability to channel that magic through her music. But she's here to develop that even further, and developing it further will help her to gain a greater understanding of reality and of herself, and a greater connection to all things. And so, these elders explain, she needs to go on a journey from here. She needs to go out of this shop into this old land and in search of a tunnel. And she'll meet some others on her journey. But she needs to pass through that tunnel. And she'll know when she's found what she's seeking, when she has it. And the fairy finds this a little vague. She's told to just leave her guitar here for now. She can collect it as she passes back through. And so she leaves the guitar and leaves the shop. And as she leaves the shop, she opens the door. It trings on the bell above the door, then trings again as the door closes behind her. And she finds herself in a Victorian shopping street. Only all the sounds here appear to be numbed and dulled. There seems to be no real echoes to the sounds, no reverberation to the sounds. Everything appears to be quite muted, and she explores around this area, following the street, walking on those cobbles, looking around her at the different shops, different stalls and vendors, different fashions people are wearing compared to what she's used to. At the end of the street is countryside, and so she uses her wings to fly into the countryside, where she had been walking to take her time to explore and to be more leisurely and relaxed. And as she flies through that countryside, she notices from time to time little flashes of red among the beautiful greens of this countryside, and realizes that somebody or something has been here before, and at certain intervals has tied red ribbon around different items. Might be red ribbon around a trunk of a tree, might be red ribbon around a branch of a tree, or red ribbon around a branch in a bush. She follows those red ribbons. And after some time following the red ribbons, she hears a little voice and looks down and sees a little beetle. And this beetle is just pottering around in its own world, doing whatever it is that beetles do. But it stopped its day to talk to her, to tell her that she's on the right track. She just needs to continue to follow these red ribbons, and that then she'll uncover a treat of this journey. And so she continues to follow the red ribbons, flying away from that beetle with its iridescent shell, curious what the treats are. And after some time longer, she sees a white rabbit hopping along, and she talks with that white rabbit, who asks her to climb on its back and hold on tight. And then the rabbit really takes off at some speed, bounding through the woodland, bounding through countryside, through tall grass, before arriving at a rabbit hole. And then the rabbit says, "Here is your next step of your journey." And the fairy thinks to herself, what a treat that ride was. And she starts to head into this rabbit hole. And while heading into the rabbit hole, she can see pulses of light. Like thin threads under the ground. She follows the pulsing light. She can hear the sound of her footsteps, almost dull, as she walks through this rabbit hole. As the light from the entrance fades, while she continues to walk deeper into the rabbit hole, gently illuminated by these pulsing, glowing threads. She starts to notice some glowing toadstools dotted around the inside of the rabbit hole, realizing that they're connected to these threads. And as she touches one of the toadstools, it seems to react to her touch, so gently and softly. And so she continues exploring and realizes that this must be the mycelium network, a network that allows all the plants in this land to communicate, that connects all things here. And the rabbit hole seems to go on for so long. She starts to think to herself that she's beginning to become tired and wants to rest. And it's at this point that she sees that this rabbit hole opens out into a larger chamber. And in the middle of the chamber is an upturned pineapple. She walks over to that pineapple, realizes that it looks like a house, like it's been hollowed out. And she walks to the front of that pineapple, knocks on the door, and after a few moments of hearing some motion coming from behind the door, some micro penguins answer the door. Incredibly tiny, almost thimble-sized penguins. She's never seen anything quite like it. And these penguins welcome her in, invite her into their home. And inside the home, it smells strongly of pineapple, and she explores this pineapple house, while engaging in conversation with the penguins and their curious, squeaky voices. And one of the penguins tells her the place that she should be is sitting in their rocking chair. And so she goes and gently sits in the rocking chair. And one of the penguins begins to rock that chair, rocking her backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards. And while she rocks, it's almost like she's being rocked to sleep, rocked gently into a dream, backwards and forwards. And she rests in that rocking chair, her eyes gradually closing, becoming heavier and heavier, her breathing becoming deeper and more calm and relaxed, her mind calming, softening, quietening. She dreams of rising up out of that pineapple house, rising up beyond the rabbit hole, rising up beyond the woodland and countryside overhead, till she's looking down on everything below. And noticed how some things are things she'd be familiar to see, and other things are strange. From this vantage point, as she rises higher and higher, she can see there's a comet flying through space, so silently, its tail almost sparkling in the sky. She can see well beyond the chamber. It seems like there's an unusual land off in the distance. And she's curious how much of this is in her imagination, as she knows she's sitting in a rocking chair with her eyes shut, and how much of this is some kind of astral projection or viewing of this area. And after a while, rocking in that chair, seeing this view, she has a sense of coming back to the here and now in that chair. And as she comes around, the penguins hand her a pocket watch and tell her to follow the hands on the watch. They'll direct her where she needs to go. And so she thanks the penguins and follows that pocket watch out from the pineapple house, out from the chamber, continuing on her journey, deeper underground, following the rabbit hole, until eventually she can see a light at the end of the tunnel. She heads towards that light, and notices that the light is shining up from a staircase. And so she begins to descend that staircase, 20, 19, 18. Each step that she takes, she feels like she's going deeper and deeper into the experience. 17, 16, 15, 14, 13, 12, going all the way deeper and deeper. 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, so easily and effortlessly deeper. And deeper all the way. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, all the way to the bottom of the staircase. Then leaving the bottom of the staircase, coming out in the most beautiful fresh air, breathing in that fresh air. Feeling a sense of awe and wonder as she gazes over the most vast, beautiful landscape, this vista stretching for miles in every direction. Giant valley, watching a condor circling overhead. And as she gazes over this vast vista, she can see a hot air balloon being piloted over the view, that forest below, those dense trees, blue sky above, slightest of breeze. And as she looks closely, she can see it's a cat piloting that hot air balloon. That the cat is wearing a little cap, keeping one paw on the lever to the flame that adjusts the hot air balloon as it hovers over the top of that valley. And she climbs down, following a path down deep into the valley. As she climbs down, she can begin to hear the sound of flowing water that's obviously flowing down the same steep slope she's climbing down. She reaches the base of the valley, notices a stream opening out into a river, and how this stream seems to be coming from a small waterfall, and that there seems to be other streams doing the same flowing into this one river. And she builds a raft from some branches from the trees, and using some of the vines to tie those branches together, some of the leaves for added protection from the water, and for comfort on the raft. She fashions a branch into a paddle, pushes off from the bank, climbs onto the raft. The raft swaying slightly left and right as she lands on it, and planting her feet onto the raft firmly. She begins paddling and uses her wings as a way to help increase the speed of the raft. The wings vibrating behind her back as the raft is propelled forward, and she follows this river, steering, navigating the river, hearing the sounds of the valley, birds and other animals, seeing the sky overhead, feeling the temperature of the air on her cheeks. As she follows this river, it opens out into a lake. She crosses the lake in the raft, seeing a shack on the far side of the lake. Lets the raft slide up onto the land, leaves the raft, looks back over the journey so far, across the lake towards that river, explores around the edge of the lake, finding some shells, interesting stones, before heading into that hut. And inside the hut, she sees what looks like the same picture that she initially stepped through on the wall above the fireplace. She can feel the warmth of that gently crackling fire in the fireplace. And she is curious how this picture could be here. What are the odds of it being the same picture? And as she reaches out for that picture, notices her hand going through it. She flaps her wings, raising just off the ground. Gently, slowly, flies towards the picture, flies into the picture, notices that she can see herself as she was when she arrived the first time in this location. And although she seems to be in the picture again, she's in the picture, but above the picture all at once. She watches as that herself finds its way to the edge, descends down to the seafront, sees that whale, rides on the dragon. And as she's absorbing all this and trying to understand it all, She notices that the picture seems to almost glitch, and she's curious why that is. She tries to take a closer look, and as she takes a closer look, she heads down to the seafront. And down on the seafront, a narwhal comes near the shore, its long tusk-like tooth protruding high into the sky. As it pops its head out of the water and begins to talk to the fairy, and the fairy explains what they had seen. And this narwhal says that there are crossroads here. For every decision that you make, where more than one decision could have been made, reality divides. And the you that makes each decision follows each reality. And you're just seeing the overlays of the realities. Different paths laid out. You've travelled back in time slightly, just far enough to see the reality you chose when you arrived here. And you can see the decisions you've made on the way, which ones have been positive and beneficial, which ones perhaps haven't been. The narwhal dives down into the ocean. They flick a golden coin in the fairy's direction, and the fairy catches that coin, takes a look at the back and the front, and doesn't recognize this coin, and yet it's heavy, and they understand it to be a golden coin. And the narwhal says, "This coin can help to guide you. Place this coin on the pocket watch." And so the fairy places the coin on the pocket watch, twists it around a little, moves it around, moves the outside of the pocket watch a little, and then the coin just seems to magically snap into place. And as it does, blue light emanates up from the pocket watch. And in that blue light is a mist, and within that mist is that mouse. And the mouse in the mist explains that they're in their original realm. You've been passing through realms, learning about the nature of reality and life. And that if you follow this signal back, you'll find your way back from the reality. You don't have to go the way you came in. You can find a new way out. And so the fairy follows the signals by the watch, finds their way out of the painting, finding themselves looking at that book with that painting in front of them. They fold that painting over and close the book. The mouse says, "I have one last gift for you to help you to truly internalize your learnings here. You can revisit your learnings in your mind's eye." And so the mouse gestures for the fairy to sit in a chair near the fire. The fairy sits down in that chair, and the mouse begins to guide her deeply into a profound state of mind. Just take a moment to focus on the top of your head. Notice what the top of your head feels like as you relax there so deeply and comfortably. And then continue that focus. Then it moves down around the top of your head, around your eyes, ears, and down to your mouth. And then allow that deep relaxation to move down through the neck, down to the shoulders, the upper back, softening and relaxing, peaceful, deeper and deeper, down each arm, down the left arm, down the right arm, down around the wings, tingling relaxation and profound deepness out through both wings, around the upper back, lower back, around the chest and the stomach, relaxing, softening, deepening down the sides and into the legs. The whole time, the fairy becoming deeper and deeper, more absorbed in the experience, so profoundly, so calmly and relaxed. That relaxation spreads all the way down to the tips of her toes, and she feels her mind relaxing and her body relaxing. She feels the relaxation spreading through her. And then the mouse rubs its front paws together, places them on the fairy's shoulders. So just notice the way a healing light can enter your body and travel through you. And any negativity can pass from your body, through my paws, through me. It'll be cleansed as it passes through one paw, and healing light will enter through my other paw back into you. And she notices a healing light moving down through her head, down through her body, down to the tips of her fingers, sparkling through her wings, all the way down to the tips of her toes. And any negativity reverberating back up to the mouse's paw, cleansing through the mouse before passing back through the other paw, back into the fairy sat there so calmly. And then the healing light passing down through that fairy to the tips of her toes. The mouse says it's time to integrate this learning about your understanding of reality, this deeper understanding of reality and change. And the fairy begins to internalize that, and as she does, she notices the light beginning to change colour, and the faintest, thinnest golden hue forming around her body and mind, almost sparkling like 100 delicate chimes. And after this healing golden light has filled her body, the mouse removes its paws from her shoulders takes a few moments peace before drifting back and seeing that mouse stood there. And the mouse says if you hang on to this experience, it'll transform your perception of the world around you. You'll understand things on a much deeper level. And the mouse guides the fairy out of this place, back to where they met them. And the fairy carries with them that insight and returns back to that trunk with their guitar. And as they play music on that trunk with their guitar, so they notice the healing light emanating from the guitar, the well-being they feel within themselves, a deep sense of peace, calm and serenity as they watch over the land, curious about their experiences and about the future with their newfound wisdom and understanding of the true nature of reality and change. And as the sun sets and the stars appear in the sky, the fairy heads home, settles down at home, and deeply dreaming of their experience, they drift and float so peacefully, so calmly, so comfortably, asleep into slumberland. So just take a moment to allow your eyes to close and allow yourself to begin to relax. And with your eyes closed, I don't know whether you'll drift asleep faster to the sound of my voice or whether it'll be to the spaces between my words. And as you begin to comfortably drift asleep, I'm just going to tell this sleep story in the background. And as you drift peacefully asleep, I'm just going to tell this story about a woman who goes out on her morning walk like she does every day. Only this time, she finds a bottle in a stream that leads her on a journey to discover a secret temple, and she enjoys a peaceful life. Every day she wakes up, she goes for a morning walk, enjoying the fresh air, breathing in that cool air, feeling the cool air pass in through her nostrils, pulling that air down into her chest, then exhaling the warmer air as she feels a deep sense of peace and inner relaxation. Walking along, listening to the sounds around her. Listening to sounds of birdsong coming from the trees in the hedgerows. The scampering sounds of squirrels. And as she walks through this quaint, quiet village and out into the countryside, she can see the rabbits across the fields. She can see pheasants in the fields, the colourful male pheasants, and the harder to spot, mottled brown female pheasants, hearing the occasional pheasant call, seeing the wispy clouds gently passing overhead, and occasionally a bird of prey just slowly circling and then moving on to a different area and circling that area, barely flapping its wings. And as she walks, you can notice the way the sound changes with each footstep, depending on what she's walking on. Walking along the path into the countryside, how that sound of the walking changes as she walks onto hardened mud and continues on to grass, and then passes into the woodland, feeling the change of the air temperature as she walks through the trees out from the sunlight, and that there's also a change in the quality of the sound around her, that she starts to notice slightly different sounds, the way certain bird sounds echo through the woodland, and spying a stag among the trees, just catching the slightest glimpse of that stag stood stationary, trying to blend in, avoid detection, and stopping still herself to watch and get a better look without disturbing or scaring that stag off. And then, as the stag just gently walks deeper into the woodland, the woman continues to follow her path. A slight crunching sound underfoot, seeing the shards of light dancing in front of her, as those areas of sunlight just penetrate through the canopy overhead. And every day she goes on this morning walk, those shards of light passing through the canopy overhead, dancing in front of her, catch the dust in the air, almost looking like dancing diamonds. And while walking through those shards of light, she can feel the slight temperature change, especially on her face, as the light passes across her cheek. She enjoys the silence of this walk, the peace and harmony of this walk. Deeper and deeper into the woodland. And after some time, she begins to hear the gentle, distant sound of a flowing stream. She continues to walk through this woodland, softly relaxing, occasionally drifting into her own mind, pondering different thoughts and ideas. As the woodland begins to slant downhill slightly. She follows this woodland down that hill till she comes to a point where the gently trickling stream comes alongside where she's walking, and she can see the water flowing down over stones, around stones, bubbling and splashing its way down. Occasional twigs and leaves flowing down on the water's surface, racing down that stream. And she follows that stream all the way down to the edge of this woodland. And as the stream reaches the edge of the woodland, so it begins to get wider. It begins to get softer and calmer. And she follows that stream out into a clearing. In this clearing, there's a meadow of wildflowers where she can see bees and butterflies working away in the meadow, tootling along from plant to plant. Holding on to plants as they sway in the breeze. And she heads out into this meadow, continuing to follow this gentle stream, and heads to a tree trunk alongside the stream. Takes a moment to sit on that tree trunk. Closes her eyes and just listens to the sound of that water as it bubbles past her. Smelling the fresh water smell. Feeling the warmth of the sun on her face. Noticing the light and dark passing across her eyes as wispy clouds pass across the sun. Feeling the warmth of that morning sun. And she opens her eyes and crouches down. Get a sense of what that water feels like, what temperature the water is. She touches the surface of the water with her fingertips, just passing them gently through the surface of the water. And she can feel that water as it rushes around her fingers, rushes through her fingers, almost a tickle-touch feeling through and around her fingers. And then, while her hand is in the water, something that's bobbing its way down the stream suddenly knocks into her hand. She pays attention to what that was. It knocks her out of her reverie for a moment. And she sees that it appears to be an opaque bottle, and it looks curious. So she stands up and she follows that bottle, walking fast along the edge of the stream to catch up with where the bottle is. Comes alongside that bottle, watches for a while as she walks alongside it, and it continues bobbing its way down the stream. And she gets slightly ahead and then reaches in, grabs that bottle. She goes back to that trunk, sits down on the trunk. While sitting on the trunk, she looks at this bottle. And the bottle is broad enough that the thumb and fingers don't meet while she holds it. And she twists that bottle around and looks at the base of the bottle. And she can't see into the bottle, but she notices the base is indented. And there are symbols on the bottom, around the edge of the bottom, that she can't understand. And she thinks to herself she'll try and do a bit of a Sherlock Holmes. She tries to see if there's any way of working any information out about this bottle. She couldn't see any markings on the base that would reveal the location, only the symbols that she didn't understand. There was no labels on the bottle. There was no markings around the side of the bottle. The top of the bottle had a cork in it. And all she could think was that the style of the bottle made her think of some Roman pottery and Roman bottles that she had seen. It had a similar style. But she wasn't sure if it could possibly be that old, because that would make it at least 1600 years old. And she wondered how it got into the stream. If it was that old, it would have somehow had to be dislodged or somehow made it into the flowing stream. She thinks to herself it makes more sense that perhaps someone was just littering and just threw the bottle away. And she shook the bottle next to her ear and couldn't hear anything in the bottle, no movement at all. She tipped the bottle upside down and up the right way and upside down and up the right way. It didn't feel like there was anything in it moving, no liquid, no objects, because if there was, the weight would have displaced and moved as she moved the bottle. And she wondered if it was an empty bottle, how was it corked? Did someone manage to just squeeze this cork into the bottle? What would be the purpose of someone doing that to an empty bottle? And she decided that she would pull that cork out of the bottle. Out of curiosity, she thought, it's not like there's anyone here who wants this bottle. It doesn't seem like it belongs to anybody. And so, tentatively, carefully, she pulled on that cork. and at first didn't seem to be making any difference. So she pulled harder and harder and felt like she was putting a lot of effort into pulling that cork from the bottle. And then all of a sudden, in an instant, the cork popped out of the bottle in her hand, and she heard a gentle sss, as if there was a release of gas. And then there was silence from the bottle. And then suddenly, an explosion of gas, straight up vertically from the bottle. And this gas had a green hue. And she watched as that green hue gas rose up into the air, narrow and vertical at first, and then spread out, and almost seemed to be heavier than the air because it started to seem to fall down, not straight down back towards the bottle, but it was falling down almost as if it was reaching a certain height, and then just falling down alongside the bottle. And she could see it settling onto the tree trunk beside her. And there was a lot of this gas. And as this green gas was touching the tree trunk, so it was like green dust or green dusty paint touching the trunk. It was looking like it was starting to stain that trunk. But the gas seemed to be falling thicker and faster and faster and thicker, and still spraying up out of the bottle. And she was just holding the bottle almost mesmerized, surprised at what she was seeing. Curious how so much gas can fit into such a small space. And that green gas was thickening alongside her, and seemed to be growing, almost as if it was creating a stain on the tree trunk, and that stain was getting thicker and thicker, like building up dust over time. And after some time, she noticed that it wasn't just dusty gas from this bottle settling randomly beside her. It seemed to be settling with some kind of order. And this dust continued to settle, getting thicker and thicker. And as this dust settled thicker and thicker beside her, she thought it resembled 3D printers printing something, like it was building something from the ground up. But she had no idea what, and it seemed to be taking a very long time. And after what seemed like an age, she noticed that this green dust had been building on the grass in front of the trunk as well, and that was catching up with the height of the trunk in two neat piles. And then the dust accelerated in how fast it was spraying up into the air and landing beside her. And it started to get more chaotic to see exactly what was going on. But after a while, the dust started to slow, and she started to notice it becoming clearer beside her so that she could see what was there. And she saw this person in green, with unusual green skin, sitting beside her, looking at her as the dust finished settling and stopped spraying from the bottle. And they reached over and they took the bottle from her hand while she was in a bit of a dazed state at what she was seeing. And they took the cork from her other hand. They smiled at her and thanked her for the bottle and the cork, and for opening the bottle. And they placed that cork effortlessly into the top of the bottle, and placed the bottle into their pocket. And they explained that they're a genie, that they had been trapped in that bottle for centuries, and that all the time they've been trapped in that bottle, they've been waiting for somebody to find the bottle and release them. That they have a problem that they need help with. An evil wizard, centuries earlier, had removed their power to grant wishes, and so they're now a genie with no ability to grant any wishes, and they've required help to be able to do so, and that she's the first person in all those centuries to open this bottle who may be able to help. And this genie explains that they need the woman to go in search of a secret temple. And the woman explains that there are no temples here. There's a village just nearby. There's a church in the village, if that's what the genie's talking about. But she doesn't know of any secret temples. And the woman asks why they can't do it themselves. And the genie explains that they'll come along with the woman, but they can't access this secret temple. That the spell that the wizard had cast placed their ability to grant wishes within that temple, and placed a spell on the outside of the temple, prevented any magical beings from being able to cross the threshold into the temple. And then the wizard banished them back into the bottle, sealed the bottle, and buried the bottle. And they have no way of escaping the bottle themselves. They always rely on someone else to come along and do that for them. And so the woman agrees to help. But she says she doesn't know where she can start helping and finding this temple. And the genie says they can help with that. They just can't access the temple themselves. And out of their pocket, the genie takes what looks like a compass, hands it to the woman and says, "Here, you can use this to direct us to the temple," explaining that this compass works by detecting quantum displacement. And the woman asks what that even means. And the genie says that the wizard is a multidimensional being. And as a multidimensional being, it travels from place to place, but as it does, as it appears in one dimension or leaves a dimension, it creates a quantum displacement trail. And that even while the being is moving through dimensions, it doesn't move through dimensions in the same way that non-magical beings move. It doesn't walk through three-dimensional space. It passes through multi-dimensional space. And so there is a path that can be followed. And the woman says, but if this wizard did this hundreds of years ago, what are the chances of that being here in this location? And this secret temple being anywhere nearby? And the genie explains that the residual traces of the quantum displacement will last for thousands of years. Even just the subtle traces are enough for this compass to detect and illuminate, and that the only way their bottle could have been found here is if it somehow had dislodged and fallen into the water or passed into the water to then be found. So the bottle must have been buried somewhere near this water. And the woman turned on the compass by pressing a button on the side. And as she turned on the compass, so she saw a pulse of blue light emanate in all directions from the compass. And as the blue light dissipated, so it left trails that she could see, like the faint lines of dissipating contrails from aeroplanes. And then as the trails were fading, there was another pulse of blue light from the device that dissipated but left the hint of those trails. And at regular intervals this device kept pulsing, and the genie explained that these trails are the trails of magical beings, and that there aren't that many magical beings in this plane. And so one of these trails must be the wizard. And at first they follow back along the stream, head back into that woodland. But this time, instead of the woman following the path she had followed before, she follows the stream, taking her off the path and deeper into the woodland. And she finds her way all the way to the source of this stream, and can see that it starts with a pool of water gently bubbling up from under the ground. And the genie observes that it looks like this water has perhaps eroded away some of the ground beneath it, where it's bubbling up from, and that a bottle being buoyant means that once it was eroded into the water, it would eventually find its way to the hole that leads to the surface and pop up through that hole and then just flow down with the water. The two of them look around, curious where the water might be coming from, that then rises up from underground. And there are some nearby hills, and so they assume that somewhere just beneath their feet is probably a hollow area, an area that this water is slowly eroding, maybe a cave full of water. And the tracking device pulses, and there's just a single trail a little way away. And the genie says, "I bet that is the wizard's trail. It's the only trail here. And it's near where the bottle found its way to the surface. So perhaps the bottle was buried somewhere over there." And the trail looked very muddy at that one point. And the genie said that that would make sense because the wizard would have been on that spot for quite some time, moving around. And the woman asked, "Does the genie not leave a trail?" And they said that although they are a magical being, they're a different class of magical being. They disappear and reappear in a very different way. They don't have to walk through time and dimensions. And they explained about how they operate as genies. That they're like time travelers, and their bottles are like time traveling devices. That a bottle may seem small, but a whole world is contained within a genie's bottle. But the world is a very isolating one. Inside a genie's bottle lives animals, plants, but only one genie, only one of their life form per bottle. And so it can be very lonely inside the bottle. But time inside the bottle is very different from time outside the bottle. Moments can pass inside the bottle when years have passed outside of it. And when genies are out of a bottle, they can get themselves back into the bottle. And when they're out of the bottle, they have to move around and operate in the same way that any other being in that world has to operate. They're not multidimensional like the other beings. And they explain that they can't get themselves out of the bottle. So once they're in the bottle, they're trapped in the bottle until someone frees them. And the woman talks to the genie about that sounding like a very lonely life. Why on earth would they ever put themselves in the bottle? And as they were having this conversation, they were walking out of the woodland across the meadow, following that faint blue path likely left by the wizard, which is revealed with every pulse of the device. And the genie explains that the role of a genie is that you're born into existence through magic. You just find yourself aware one day. There's no knowledge of where you came from. You're just suddenly there and aware. And you're in this world that's so incredibly beautiful. And you don't feel hunger or thirst. You just exist. You don't feel tired. You just are. And in your mind, you just have certain instinctive, innate knowledge. So no knowledge of where you came from, how you sprung into being. But you're aware, with instinctive knowledge, that you're in a world created and designed for you. And you're aware that you're in a world with a purpose, with destiny, and that your destiny is to grant 3 wishes to an individual that brings them happiness. And passes something positive on to their life, that individual will then pass on to others. And your role is kind of as a guide. That every time someone calls upon you, you let them know that you can grant them 3 wishes and that they're to use those wishes wisely and to give thought to those wishes. And you grant those wishes honestly, exactly as they were asked. That you don't have the power to grant them something different to what they asked. So if they ask for something and you know that they mean something slightly different, you can't say that you know they mean something different. You can just ask if they're sure that that is what they really want. And you warn them against the risks of making a wrong wish and of having to really think through the wish before you say, yes, I'm certain that is the wish I want. And then when you click your fingers as a genie, the exact wish they asked for is what is granted. And with practice as a genie, you get better at helping to guide those who ask for wishes. But it is once you manage to grant 3 wishes for somebody, where they're content and happy with the wishes they received, and those wishes have a positive impact on the lives of them and others, and you know you've done your piece for the world. It is only at that point that you stop, disappearing back into the bottle, and instead get to ascend to a higher land, to a higher dimension. Every time you grant wishes, where the wishes don't work out positively, and they make the person's life worse in some way, there's nothing you can do about that. But at the end of granting the 3 wishes, you instantly disappear back into the bottle, and it doesn't matter how much that person tries to open the lid of the bottle, tries to pull that cork out. Even if they succeeded in pulling the cork out, nothing happens. The genie can't come out of the bottle, because they can't come back to grant any more wishes for that person. And if the wish turned out negatively for them, then they had consequences from that. And it can take a very long time to find that person clicks their fingers and wishes for the right things, freeing the genie permanently. And the genie explained that they don't know what happens beyond that yet. They're just guided instinctively by the behaviours they have to do, the role they have to play. And they wonder whether somehow this evil wizard that took away their powers perhaps had done so to other genies. And maybe was trying to prevent something in some way from happening. And the woman and the genie walked all day, camped on the edge of the most serene river at night, before continuing on walking the next day. The device constantly pulsing, revealing the path they needed to follow. Until eventually they came to a hill, an unassuming hill in the middle of the countryside. And it wasn't a hill the woman was wholly unfamiliar with, but to the woman this was just a regular hill, perhaps 30 miles from the town that she lived in. It wasn't particularly spectacular, and if she knew she was going to this hill, she could have got here a lot quicker, rather than walking all this way. But it appeared that the path was leading straight into the side of this hill. And so the genie said there must be a tunnel somewhere just in the side of the hill here, where that path is going. maybe something has collapsed. Maybe it's all hidden here. And so the woman started looking around the hill, see if there was any way into this hill. She had never heard of any temple being here. But she had never questioned why this hill was here. And so the woman said that now we know where this is, why don't I go to the nearby town and I'll get a spade and we can try and access and dig into this hill. So she went away and came back with a spade. And with that spade she began to dig into the location where she could see that this being had walked. And as she dug into this hill, she eventually reached a point where she hit some stone and realized it was stone of an entrance. Like maybe there is something here, and she cleared that away. And as she cleared that away, she saw that this was an entrance, that it looked like someone had covered over this temple, buried this temple in this location. And in the center of this entrance, stones were just packed in. And so she pulled those stones out one at a time. And after she'd pulled a mound of stones out, the entrance was clear. And she could see that the faint blue path was heading into this passageway. And so the two of them headed in to the passageway. The woman holding a torch, slight echoing coming from the footsteps. And the passageway opened out into a vast chamber. The genie said this is definitely the secret temple. And in the middle of the vast chamber was an orb of electric blue energy floating in the middle of the chamber. And the genie said that that orb of energy is what was stolen from me. And the woman was curious where the wizard now was. They'd gone to this effort of doing this, perhaps hundreds and hundreds of years ago. But would they really have just disappeared? And the genie said maybe, with hundreds of years of me being buried and not returning, they thought they'd rid the genies from the land, stopped us being able to grant wishes. Maybe there are other genies this had happened to who are buried. And that they've just never been uncovered. And it just is fortuitous that that spring had eroded the dirt enough to release the bottle. And that bottle happened to be released at a time that you could find it. And the genie walked over to the glowing blue orb of energy. They reached their hand out, touching the orb, and the orb seemed to suddenly come to life and be absorbed into them. And the genie said they can feel their energy coming back. They can feel that magic returning within them. And as the magic returned, so the genie appeared to glow and pulse, illuminating the chamber just with their own glow and presence. And they left this secret temple, and the two of them recovered up the entrance. And the woman said, "What now?" And the genie said, "Well, now you have 3 wishes." And the woman said, "But I don't want to make a mistake and say the wrong thing." The woman said, "Well, I wish that you knew whether there were more genies, and where those genies are." And the genie said, "That's 2 wishes. It needs to just be 1 wish." And so the woman said, "I wish you knew whether there were more genies." And the genie clicked their fingers, granting the wish, and said, "I'm the only one." And the woman said, "I wish you knew your purpose." And the genie clicked their fingers and said, "My purpose is to achieve ascension." And the woman said, "I wish you knew what happens after granting 3 wishes." And the genie clicked their fingers and turned into a being of light. And as just a voice coming from this being of light, the genie thanked the woman and said, "I now know what happens after granting 3 wishes. The genie explains that they now know everything. They pass through multiple planes of existence, and one of those planes of existence is on the physical realm. And when they pass the physical realm, they move on to the spiritual realm. And that this is the highest realm to achieve. And with every genie that reaches the spiritual realm, another genie passes into the physical realm with no memory or knowledge of how they got there, just finding themselves in a bottle, in a world of their own creation, with innate knowledge and drives, waiting for the right person to help them while they learn how to help others, so that they too can ascend from the physical realm. And the genie is a being of light, dissipated, and the device the woman was holding seemed to just disintegrate in her hand. and she could no longer see the blue trails. And she almost wondered whether the experience that had just happened was real or not. It seemed so unreal. And she headed home, having had a couple of days of curious experiences. It all started just with a morning walk like usual. And once home, she settled down in bed and drifted and floated so peacefully, so comfortably and calmly, asleep into slumberland.